And so I'm going to frame the issue a little bit, introduce the topic, frame the issue a little bit. I know some of you in the audience are familiar with our work. We're a nonprofit, just like DCI. Brownfields Foundation does a lot of pre-development work, a lot of recognizance. Is that a word? Did I say that right? We work with communities across the state, so I have a pretty good cross-section, large and small. And so what I thought I would do would kind of explain how we look at the community as a system and land use and how that translates into real estate and land acquisitions. And so I will, I'm going to frame this issue from my perspective, and so you're welcome to agree, disagree. I think that's what it's all about here. We tend to think of communities as a system working together, and I've identified 3 local government functions. I'm not necessarily trying to identify departments or staff or agencies, just functions that that take place in local governments that are important: economic development, community development, and workforce development that we see really working together. Community development, of course, is trying to improve and strengthen community wealth, create quality of life, improve quality of life, creating a positive investment environment for private sector as well as public sector, and support private property values. Economic development is all about job creation and business expansion, retention, and attraction. Workforce development brings in elements of education, workforce training, placement, really creating a local skill set that matches the area's natural assets and helps promote the economy. And how these are all connected as we see them is, say, community development creates economic and investment stability to enable economic development to bring in new businesses and new jobs, which then creates demand for workers. Community development provides housing for that workforce. And what's in the center of all this is real property. We like to think of real property as the economic infrastructure of a community. It's where businesses locate to. It's where people live. It's where activities take place. And it sometimes gets lost in that discussion of citizens and businesses. But real estate is a very important thing. Again, community development, we have public facilities and mobility. Mobility is extremely important. Obviously, we're talking about not only transit, public transportation, but roadways, how the elements of housing and jobs and downtowns and districts, how they connect and flow, where are the community nodes and where do they connect. Again, this creates a vested interest in the local government to take an active role. How active that role, I think, is up for discussion today, but an active role in what the real property of that community looks like and does and how it performs. And I'm being very specific in terms of real property versus real estate. There's definitional differences. Real property, for those of you who don't work in that arena, is the physical real estate plus all the property rights inherent in that. There's all sorts of reasons why a local government would get involved in the real estate markets, removing blight, removing eyesores at least, introducing architectural themes and landscapes, trying to create a sense of community in place, creating business districts, creating business incubators. Again, kind of a mesh between that workforce training and economic development. Addressing and taking care of, taking advantage of context modifiers, things that are being introduced into your communities that could be taken advantage of for positive change, such as light rail stations. And of course, there's all sorts of redevelopment challenges as well. There's several ways that local governments already manage their real estate interests. There's things that are passive kinds of things that local governments do, from land use planning, and again, which is kind of controlling those property rights inherent in the real estate, land use planning, zoning, ordinances, nuisance ordinances, public dedication requirements, required to provide park space or school space if you're going to add so much development, ways of of taking and maintaining and trying to create that balance of land uses. There's a little bit more proactive things that some communities do, and this is something that we get involved a lot in, is providing market information, just market positioning, trying to prime the pump of development. I'm talking right now specifically about private development, doing market studies, market analysis, not just providing a comprehensive plan or small area plan, but maybe even going out and specifically modeling the financial investment of a piece of property so the market can understand it. Sometimes the investigative costs for a developer to come in and determine whether it wants to deal with a piece of property is a large enough hurdle to keep them away. So if we can try to bring down some of those hurdles and attract development in, that's a way of doing it. And then there's more proactive land development activities, like we're going to be talking about today. Land banking, proactively going out and acquiring property, holding property. Is that things that we should do or not do? There are certain states in the last few years, such as Michigan, Ohio, a lot of the Rust Belt states, which have gotten very proactive in their land banking activities and have been very successful. I'm not sure if we have those kinds of properties here in Colorado to warrant large-scale land banking activities. Some of the things that we get involved with are more surgical in scale. We're getting involved in a project or an area where we can target catalyst sites and try to either directly acquire or somehow support public-private partnerships to do that surgical kinds of acquisition. By way of kind of bringing this home a little bit and introducing Tony Chacon, who's going to talk more in depth about Westminster. I'm going to talk about, this is a map of Westminster, South Westminster Historic District. And this is a project that we've been working with the City of Westminster on for probably about the last 10 years. And this is the old historic district of Westminster. Some neat buildings, certainly some buildings in need of repair. At the time, what was identified was different phases of development. And we started this approach with providing that market information, doing that marketing positioning, crunching numbers, getting financial analysis out there, evaluating what a pro forma might look like, attracting a private developer to come in. Kind of a planned approach to all this. These numbers indicate phases of the project. And the first thing that was recognized in here, the end goal was to get to commercial development and job creation and tax revenues. But the recognition that we needed some rooftops, some quality rooftops, and improved housing stock in order to support retail uses or other commercial uses. Phase one was an old nursing home that had been closed for years, turned into townhome development. Number two was a second townhome development site. Number three was finally the commercial corner that got redeveloped, and I'll talk about that in a second. And four was actually the last phase, which was just completed. I think they are waiting to sell their last unit of residential to the north of that. But trying to strategically and surgically bring up the community, introduce rooftops in a strategic manner. I've been using that word a lot, strategic. And engaging and working directly with a private partner to be the feet on the ground. This commercial corner, what was an old gas station and an old ice cream store, is now on the corner. Not only is it two-story, nice-looking building, has some historical architectural features. There's first-floor retail, second-floor office. The first-floor retail, small bays, works great as incubator space, small businesses, 13 businesses in there. This is, I have to throw this in here, this is a brownfield site. This is actually built on over an active cleanup. That gas station site did leave petroleum behind. The cleanup is actually going on underneath the building right now as occupants are in there, and we do have a sign-off from the state that it is safe to occupy. And it was not my project. I like to refer to these things as my building, but not my specific project. Where this brings in, we're able to, the City of Westminster was able to partner and bring up this whole neighborhood here, where it fits in with the bigger, before I get to that, the bottom line of this investment, of this public-private partnership, and I think Tony's going to get a little bit more into details of what that partnership might have looked like, basically ended up with increased taxes to the city, to the county, to the school districts. We have new employment, 32 new jobs, 13 small businesses. Some of them relocated, some of them are new. Increase in total payroll of about $1.1 million into this neighborhood to then recirculate inside there. And the bottom line of all this is its rate of return on public investment. There's a positive impact. What that rate of return is to any one local government and whether it's worth, I think, is an internal policy discussion. I think it was worth it in terms of not only my perspective, not only in terms of dollars back to the City of Westminster and Economic Development Authority, but also in terms of those non-monetary benefits of bringing up the neighborhood, creating a better quality of life, creating an attractive place for people to live and work, and fitting into the larger context. The X is where this, approximately where this site is. We're within about a half mile of the hopefully soon to be light rail stop at Federal. It's within about a half mile, which is outside of what you usually think of as the quarter-mile TOD, but it's certainly within the TOD, within the light rail influence area. Certainly a neighborhood that will serve that transit station, and the transit station will, in turn will serve that, and creates a seed for revitalization for that whole larger area there. And those are the kinds of benefits we see in that. There's my contact information. I'm going to call up Tony here to carry on the story of Westminster.
Again, my name's Tony Chacon. I work with the City of Westminster, and I want to say in no means am I an expertise on land banking. Most of the expertise I have was a matter of falling into positions of having to land bank property. So what I'm here to do is kind of share with you the City of Westminster's experiences and how land banking factors in on several fronts. In fact, what I will be showcasing are 3 project areas, each having different needs, but each benefiting to some degree from land banking, and how land banking is designed to fit those particular needs. So the first thing I want to talk about is, I put up here is to land bank or not to land bank. And I will tell you, I believe land banking has benefit if done strategically. It meets certain goals of the community. But land banking of itself, first of all, it can't be done alone. And then secondly, I really question if there is the necessity for some land banking on some projects or some areas throughout the metro area, and especially in Westminster. What the tendency, I think, is right now is everybody has this notion that the economy the way it is, if you secure properties and you can hold it for a significant period of time, the economy will come back, and then it will be a benefit from a development side of things. And I think in some circumstances that's true, but I think there are other circumstances where that may actually not be the case. And in fact, in some circumstances, you may actually be buying into property that will have diminishing value over time, especially if you're doing revitalization, redevelopment areas, because you're usually paying for the improvements plus land, and then with time, you're getting rid of the improvements. So you're moving into territory that you may not actually get a return on that land bank investment. So first of all, City of Westminster, we have no established policy on land banking. So in other words, we don't have anything that says these are the criteria by which we will go out there and look at properties to acquire, nor have we set aside any kind of budget for these types of acquisitions. So everything is done primarily on a case-by-case basis. Also, decisions are based on opportunity or goals themselves. So, for example, we have a goal in the South Westminster area of revitalizing the neighborhood. It's over 250 acres in size, the revitalization area, in excess of 500 individual properties. In no way can the city go out there and start assembling all these pieces of property for development, nor can the development community go out there and assemble all 250 or 500 parcels of land. So in that context, we can't go buy the property, but the goal is to try and get as much property as you can. Again, we look at it more strategically in that vein. that makes sense to start driving the private sector towards development activity in an area that we haven't seen any or significant activity in a long time. The City of Westminster, any land banking is usually a product of revitalization and or redevelopment interests. We are not speculative on properties out on the fringe of the city just for the fact that the property's cheap and it could be developed in the future. Again, there may be a variance to that in that if it is a prime site for a project that would reap substantial economic benefit to the city, I can imagine that, and it was a great deal, they most probably would pursue it. But generally, we focus on redevelopment and revitalization areas. The other thing, land banking right now, I mean, it's subject as local governments. I don't think any of us has a lot of surplus money laying around. And a lot of people will tend to rely on their urban renewal authorities to provide that financing means or the vehicle to have the resources, the financial resources. But from our experience in Westminster, even our best producing tax increment zones, they're struggling. So there's really not a lot of surplus money out there to assist with the land banking issue, which leads you to look for other avenues or explore creative methods to pursue the land banking. And that then leads really what we're really focused on now at the City of Westminster is a partnership focus. So we only look at land banking where we feel confidence that we can bring other partners into the deal. And partners don't have to be investors or land developers. Partners actually could be the property owners themselves and what they can bring to the table. And that all leads to is basically reduced risk. We're trying to reduce the risk to the city and its subordinate organizations. So here's the city has, in its decision making, again, everything's case by case. So we have projects come through and opportunities present themselves. So we basically go through a series of criteria and discussion points to decide whether or not it's worthwhile pursuing a piece of property. First of all, it's the opportunity to actually implement a plan or achieve a goal. Again, everything is goal-driven. And if it falls outside of those community or city goals, then it's something we're really not going to pursue. I've heard of some local governments, not necessarily here in this area, but other parts of the country, where it's a piece of property becomes available regardless of its location, they'll go snap it up. But in those instances, maybe it's a waste of money because you don't know what you're going to do with that property. I can tell you, for example, one circumstance in Westminster that recently occurred where there was a piece of ground, vacant tract of ground, that really doesn't offer much redevelopment or development opportunity, primarily because the city's regulations inhibited any development on that property. Yet the city felt it was such a good deal from a value or a price standpoint, we went and bought it anyway. But in reflection, you have to go back and question what was going to be the long-term benefit of that acquisition. And so there are circumstances that you will make those mistakes, but what I would suggest is on the front end, make sure that you're looking at your community goals and the vision and that any acquisitions are going to be in pursuit of that. And again, it's very important that that be more short-term than extremely long-term, I believe. The strategic location of the properties. Again, we don't want to be out there just buying up properties willy-nilly throughout a neighborhood. The South Westminster neighborhood, for example, you got 250 acres. You don't want to be just buying up tracts, one parcel every 2 or 3 blocks. What you really want to look for are those areas that are going to bring some development interest or economic some economic viability back to that particular community. And what you're talking about there, a lot of times, the truth of the matter is they're going to be around some symbolic opportunity, such as a transit station, which I will be actually talking about, or major intersections are great opportunities. The level of risk, and Jesse, representing the Colorado Brownfields Foundation, mentioned contamination. I will tell you, in most of our revitalization areas, you will find levels of contamination on almost all properties. The question is, what level of risk are you willing to take on that particular piece of property? We have property owners that come to our doors and say, I will give you this piece of property, only to find out it will cost you a couple $1 million to remediate that site. Is that really a piece of property that you want in your portfolio unless you have some remedy? The cost of operation and maintenance. Once you own a piece of property, you're responsible for taking care of it. And again, a lot of these properties in revitalization, redevelopment areas may have cash flow property on them. How do you basically keep the tenants happy? How do you keep cash flowing it? Even if it's a vacant tract, there's the subject of weed mowing, and there's costs associated with that. So that has to be built into your formula for success on land banking. Funding availability. Do you really have the dollars to do the deal? And the path to taking title. Now, what I'm talking about here is, how are you going to go about getting the property? Is somebody a willing seller? Are they donating the property? Or the word we all hate, urban renewal, condemnation? And I will tell you, there are circumstances from a land banking standpoint, and again, if you go back to strategic emphasis, you may actually have or want to look at that pursuit of that angle. So it's something to always take into consideration. And then again, the last thing we look at is potential for partnerships. How can we make this less risky to the local government? So what I'm going to talk about, just 3 areas that we have used land banking, and they have been used in different manners. And I thought they're actually so much different from one another. I thought you might get some interest in how we approach the land banking issue. First of all, the Westminster Center, also known as the Westminster Mall. Westminster Center actually is a little larger area than the Westminster Mall. It incorporates areas on opposite sides of the street. But here you can see in the red is the general mall area, and you will notice there are a lot of ownership parcels in there, but for the most part, most of that ownership is one large land, or was one large landowner, and then there's some other smaller ones in there. But in this circumstance, we had a mall that's in major decline. The city sees it as an opportunity for its new city center. There's the vision. Their ownership actually approached the city with an offer to sell the property finally at a reduced price. And actually, this was rather interesting. What happened is the bank actually entered into foreclosure proceedings on the property owners, took a buyout back from the property owners at about 50% of value, and then the property owners approached the city to sell the property at a rather diminished value than the city had originally estimated. There's a high level of interest from the development community. In other words, developers see this particular site as having great future opportunity for development. But there are market limitations on developer financing. So the city has been out there trying to find somebody that will help buy the property. But again, how many developers are out there that can get the means of buying down such a large investment? And then there's the city is a major revenue contribution to the city budget, past and future. And then again, I think the most important concept behind this is that the city is very interested in controlling its vision on this site. They're really wanting to limit the ability of the investment community to go out there, buy this property, and just keep flipping it, and then coming to them trying to indicate what they need to do to make the property cash flow. So the city wants control of its vision. So in this regard, what came about, the city is now the proud owner of a mall. The city basically found the resources to go buy this mall. Now, I don't think a lot of communities would have those kind of resources out there. And we were very fortunate to be able to cobble together the finances. But post-acquisition, the big issue we have right now on this particular land bank, because we don't have a developer signed up yet, we're hopefully getting close to finding somebody to work with us, is the maintenance and operation of the mall. And although we are in the process of ripping down significant amounts of that mall, there are some proprietors there, for example, J.C. Penney, that are to remain until such time as new development occurs. So there is a big budget issue that has to be addressed as part of this land bank. The South Westminster Revitalization Area, again, talking about 250 acres. And so what you actually see here, the entire slide is half that slide area is the revitalization area. You see a lot of residences. The residences aren't really part of the revitalization area, although adjacent to. But it's so large, what I've shown in the red are areas that we have looked at targeting for possible land banking because they have some strategic influence on how we pursue implementation of the plan in this area. So this is where we had a neighborhood in decline needing new investment. And I will tell you, in this particular neighborhood, we had no new residential built in 40 years until more recently, as Jesse expressed in the latest project we had done. There are many dilapidated properties or small vacant tracts of land, some for sale, some not for sale. Some we don't know their interest in selling because they actually don't respond to any inquiries. The continued transfer of ownership is an impediment to redevelopment. And so because most of these are smaller properties, the moment, for example, a vehicle repair shop becomes available for sale, it's snapped up by somebody else that wants to operate a similar enterprise. And that's because those types of facilities are hard to get in jurisdictions. In other words, you can't get them zoned anymore. So they're out there buying these properties up. So that's an inhibiting factor in our ability to promote redevelopment. The development community itself is very adverse to assemblage. You can't find developers that are going to come in and say, yeah, I'll take the time, money, effort, energy to go talk to 20 property owners over here and try and convince them all to sell their property. So really, development is unlikely to occur without city intervention of some sort. And I will tell you, in this area, partnerships are a must. Without partnerships, we would not be able to afford, nor would we possibly be interested in land banking any of this property. Now, in this particular project area, as Jesse expressed, we actually looked at land banking not as an assemblage, a collective assemblage, but an assemblage of properties that gave us, I guess it was like an emphasis of development. So the townhome project, what we actually had is we found a developer that was willing to work with the city, if the city purchased property, to basically build 60 townhomes and then about 12,000 square feet of commercial space. We did not have the opportunity to buy land, all that land, for that level of development in one location. So what we actually have is scattered sites where we could build. In one phase we had 23 units. Across the street we found a couple more parcels where we were able to put another 10 units in, and then down the street and around the corner we were able to put another 20 units in. And then the commercial building being on the corner was available also. So what the city did is we partnered with the developer to acquire this property, knowing that the development wouldn't occur necessarily overnight. It's going to take a long period of time. And as Jesse expressed, it's taken us 10 years basically to develop about 7 acres of land interspersed over a small area. But the necessity was there to actually secure that land so the developer could proceed with his project. And it was a, you know, with the developer, it was a soft relationship. In other words, on the excess land that the city had secured, if he were to walk away, then the city would have been stuck with that property and had to find another developer. We were lucky in that we found a developer, stuck with it, even though he really didn't make any profit. In fact, I call him my philanthropic developer because he never makes a profit on anything he builds today. So, but what it accomplished is over that 10 years and having that land secured is we are now getting more interest in that particular neighborhood because people drive by, they see the activity that's occurred, and they're more inclined to come look at development projects. And then the last area I want to talk about is the Westminster Station transit-oriented development area. So the city of Westminster is due to have a station built and operable by March 2016 in the vicinity of Federal Boulevard and 70th Avenue. And that is part of that Eagle P3 project. For those of you unfamiliar with that project, that's where RTD, using Denver Transit Partners, will be building a line out to DIA, the Gold Line going through Arvada to Wheat Ridge, and then also there's a small segment that will touch the city of Westminster. It's a part of what's known as the Northwest Corridor. So with that train station, we see some significant redevelopment opportunity there. A well-developed area, but old and dilapidated properties. And within the transit area, which is shown in red, we have over 90 individual property ownerships that we have to address. Just within that yellow area, we have 13 property owners we have to work with. The industrial space that currently occupies the area has continued resale value. So again, this is where investors can buy industrial property cheap, that they know this industrial property can't be built elsewhere in the metro area, and they know they can lease it cheap. But the city's interest is trying to change the character of that neighborhood, so you can see if opportunities may present themselves, you may want to land bank those type properties. Pre-development activity is needed to spur development interest. In other words, the city is looking to partner to create a catalyst project, because we feel the sooner you get something built, that will then spur additional interest in development. Without that initial catalyst project, we don't think we would have as much success in attracting development interest. And again, the city expects and city needs partnerships. So the big challenge on this plan is, you see the blue dot, that's actually where the station is going to be located. And you can see it's pretty well developed around that particular station. I have highlighted the yellow area because we have, at the city, identified that as a priority assemblage area. And so those would be properties that we are going to do everything in our power to try and secure and land bank as necessary. Because again, the development community is not going to step forward on a project like this in this particular neighborhood until we can show success. And so again, this is a project that it may take several years to fully develop, working with several developers, none of which is interested in looking to acquire this property up front. So it presents itself as a great land banking opportunity that the city of Westminster will be pursuing. So just wanted to give you those three areas, and I'll be around to answer any questions. Thank you.